our top story, which comes in from Eric Coolidge, our air cargo editor. We've been talking a lot about a freight recession in terms of trucks, but what about air cargo? Eric Coolidge joins us now.
Good morning, Eric. It's great to have you with us as always on this Monday. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in these air cargo markets. We were talking about the freight recession kind of constantly for the last month and a half, but what about now on the air side of things?
Yeah, well, everybody's worried about a potential slowdown, and we're seeing it in the numbers already since March, especially April and May. There were some new numbers out by Clive Data Services from Zenata, and the air cargo volumes were down 7% versus 2021 and 8% versus 2019 in May. They're one of these benchmarking services. So, the volumes are down. The load factors were way down. They dropped about 9 points. So that means the planes are about 9% less full, flying at about 60% total, capacity. So that's way down. And air rates are down about 10 points from the prior month, although they're still up about 16% from a year ago. And of course, these are global averages. The transatlantic market's down even more because there's so much capacity coming online now from the renewed passenger travel as people start traveling internationally to Europe a lot. So that's kind of the current state of affairs, and people are wondering how long that'll last. And the International Air Transport Association's economist a couple weeks ago at a conference here in Phoenix, she talked about the possibilities or risks of a recession, which right now she puts at about 20% maybe next year.
And so, Eric, when we first started talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw all of these air cargo companies and even passenger airlines investing in freighter conversions or investing in freighters just overall. And now we're starting to see some of those first deliveries roll in, and that's adding to this capacity now too. Is it possible that some of these companies kind of overshot what they thought they were going to need, and now we're seeing the detriments of over-ordering?
It's too early to say. I mean, there's a chance that there could be, we could still have a rebound here in the summer. Part of the reason the volumes are way down is because of the China lockdowns and the lockdowns, with the factory production and the shipping out of China, and that's starting to open up now. And so what you have is a situation where, all this pent up demand and all these orders that have been stuck there need to get out fast. Companies need their inventory. You have the peak shipping season and holidays coming up. So there could be a huge demand in the short term for cargo out of Asia. The Asia travel market's starting to open slowly. So there's more travel and wide body capacity. So it's hard to say, what the short term will be. But, long term, there's just these long term drivers that suggest that, air cargo could still be growing, maybe not at the pace it is now, but, these freighters could be needed because there's just so much demand for e-commerce, and that's made such a structural need for freighters because you need that, those shuttle services and that constant, back and forth flights to feed the inventory of e-commerce shipments. And the way the passenger airlines are reorienting or restructuring or flying a little differently or using different aircraft coming out of the pandemic means there might be less belly capacity overall, and so you might need more freighters than you did in the past.
Definitely sounds like the industry has been changed for quite some time now after the pandemic's happened. Eric, you spoke about inventories. Any latest updates about what's happening with the baby formula shortage?
Yeah, good question. We've been writing a lot about that. There's an air cargo component to it. This weekend, Abbott Laboratories, the largest infant formula manufacturer in the U.S., in what is quite a concentrated market, reopened their plant in Sturgis, Michigan, which was the one that was shut down by the FDA because of contamination concerns. So that pretty much triggered the massive supply chain or shortages at the retail stores where people couldn't find formula. There were already a lot of tightness because of supply chain issues that have been going on since last year for all the reasons, any product's been in short supply or delayed, but that really triggered things. So now that plant is starting to come online. Shipments probably won't go out to stores for a few more weeks, but that's a good sign. We also have a shipment under Operation Fly Formula, President Biden's program to bring in imports quickly from overseas on a kind of an emergency basis. Another shipment's coming in from Australia today from a company called Bubs Australia. And so that follows on some from Germany, from Nestle last week. And these are all kind of specialty formulas, ones that are really hard to find here, metabolic formulas. So those are in the pipeline, are starting to come over with either a military aircraft or contracted private cargo carriers, including United Airlines, by the way, which isn't a cargo carrier, but volunteered its planes last week to Operation Fly Formula, and will fly for several weeks from the UK with the British formula manufacturer, and they're not going to be using cargo jets. They're just going to put the formula on their wide-body passenger jets out of London Heathrow and send them to several airports in the U.S. on a regular basis over a 3-week period or so.
We talked about that a little bit on Friday. It was in our headlines of the day. I think this is really interesting because they're the first and the only passenger airline to volunteer this space and to just throw that space up on their regular passenger routes as well. Can you talk a little bit on if other passenger airlines could kind of take the hint and do the same thing, if they should do the same thing right now, or if there's now going to be enough with the Abbott plan reopening and with these extra flights now coming in from Operation Fly Formula?
I guess that's definitely a possibility. If you need something here within 5 days, you might need to charter a full, freighter and just get it here. But if you, are trying to meter it out or can't do it as quickly, and we'll put it on these passenger planes that come on a scheduled basis over time, that's a good way. I think the Defense Department, the White House is evaluating that and reaching out to the private carriers as needed. And in this case, United stepped up and said, we'll help, and actually, isn't charging for the space. I'd make one quick interesting comment. Last week, there was a hearing in Congress about the baby formula shortage, and the FDA commissioner was on, and it was interesting. He talked just in general about trying to monitor the supply chain from an FDA standpoint and when supplies get short for formula, so they don't get caught blindsided again. And he just talked about having that visibility and tracking and that information, getting it from the private sector and being able to monitor it. And it was similar to what we've seen, discussions in the private sector and when we talk about port congestion and just having those dashboards and that access to the information so they can make contingency plans on the fly. And it's interesting because he was working at Google for 5 years, so he has this sense of how supply chain data could work. So we'll have to see if they ever get that project going.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was going to be my final question for you, Eric, was kind of, it feels like with the COVID-19 pandemic and the shortages of PPE and then having to figure out how to get vaccines in and transported, that disruptions like this should be something that the FDA and the government side of things should at least have an idea of how to handle now. So I was going to ask, do you think that this is now that third step in the valuable lesson of the tracking and tracing and now the planning for these contingencies, or do you think that this is just going to be another kind of disruption that we're not going to really learn anything from?
Yeah, that's a good question. The FDA commissioner seemed really intent on that. I think part of it depends on funding from Congress. Congress has been very stingy. They don't want to raise the budget much, and so FDA's just been, working with antiquated tools. They have computer systems that are very old. They have a lot of manual processes. They've not, they don't get much money for staffing, so it's been cutbacks and just Band-Aid approaching it, and so they need new technology. And and resources and people, but part of that technology now could be, setting up links with the private sector, and you have to get cooperation from the companies to share that data, but to have some more, visibility into what's happening with the supplies, get kind of real-time sense of, which ingredients are in short supply. Did you know, by the way, that the Ukraine war has impacted the supply chain shortage because Ukraine's a big supplier of sunflower oil, and that's one of the ingredients that's mixed into infant formula. So it's, there's all these, secondary and tertiary effects that ripple down and affect supply chains.
Eric, definitely a lot of considerations to take, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Before we let you go, what's the reviews on Top Gun?
Well, on a 5-point scale, probably a 4.5. I don't know. It was great. I saw it yesterday for the first time. Yeah, I went out Sunday. I saw a Sunday afternoon matinee, and really exciting scenes, unbelievable flying, gripping flight, aerobatic scenes and fighter scenes with these Navy pilots. And I don't want to give it away, but it was great, and the storyline was good. It was, it was just one of these feel-good stories or movies that we don't see that much nowadays, and with everything going on in our lives, just kind of a good old-fashioned, fun, kind of drama action flick, and that was a lot of fun. And and the nice thing about one thing I took away from it was it didn't seem too jingoistic in the sense that the enemy they were fighting, they never named which country it was. So, I thought that was kind of a good touch. But I definitely recommend it for a fun movie.
Awesome, Eric. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always. Anthony, have you seen the new Top Gun yet?
I haven't even seen the old one, so I got to catch up.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. You can
I didn't want to say it.
If you have Amazon Prime, you can find it on Amazon Prime. So go watch Amazon Prime and then go check it out in the theaters. That's on my list to do this weekend, is to go see the new one.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it on air, but I got to expose myself. Didn't see it yet. But we're going to go over to Sydney Edwards. She has our headlines of the morning set for us.